Welcome, everybody. Yeah. Yeah, you better unmute me. Um, hey there, ladies and gents. Welcome to Almaned Paranormal. Um, hope y'all are having a wonderful Saturday. Um, if you have any questions, please don't be shy. Questions are always welcome here. So make yourself at home. You guys mean so much to me. So I will, throughout the chat, say hello to everybody. Um, you know how y'all are important to me. And if you're new to the channel and you like what I am doing, please subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell icon to get your notifications. And lastly, if you like it, give it a thumbs up. It would be appreciated. So I want to say hello. Hello, Sabra and Anne-Marie and Els and General. Hello, hello. How are you doing? Are you ready? We got some good stuff going on here. Some interesting stuff happened on the Dark Zone Live, the house, a homecoming. Very interesting things. Some new stories. Very interesting. So, how are y'all doing? Hope y'all are having a wonderful time. We're just going to wait a little bit because we know how notifications are and they take forever to get out there. I am so excited because I have finally set a time where I can get my friends in the UK. Hey, Crow. But I get all my friends from the UK, Australia, all these wonderful places that are so far behind us. And then, if I'm correct, y'all have a time change tonight? Oh, that's so good, Emery. Three Souls, Stephen, hello. So, yeah, everything. It was a rough start. It was rough start last night, but it was good. It got good. Yes, dear.
It was a very amateuristic start.
Hey, be nice. He refused to watch it. Refused. I am doing good. How are you, Stephen? Yeah, it was definitely a late start. The entire schedule, I think, was if I'm correct, almost an hour and a half sometimes. But it's to be expected because you had Roger, Nancy, and Andrea there at the location. And hello, hello, Alpha Paranormal. Hey, Dro, hello. Um, but you knew with them sitting down and talking, it was really going to, you know, a lot of stuff was going to be talked about. So you knew it was going to go a little long. Oh, you're getting ready for Halloween party. Woohoo. Dressing up as killer clowns. No, no, I don't like clowns. They freak me out. I mean, I'm not like bad freaked out by it, but it's kind of there with dolls. I'm not fond of dolls. Clowns freak me out. But take pictures because it'll be really cool to see. So, oh, I know. I remember. I never watched it because I didn't like the. Even Pennywise kind of got on my nerve. Clowns and dolls. I don't know what it is. Right, Els? I don't know what it is. No. And even as a little girl, I was not a Barbie fan. My little sister was, but not me. So, are we ready to talk about all the good stuff that happened on the Dark Zone? As I said, it did start. I mean, they really had a hard time. How long, honey? How long did it take? It was probably an hour finally when they worked things out.
It was close to an hour. Yes,
Yeah. I mean, it
close to
was,
an hour. This is just ridiculous. Really
yeah,
late.
Mr. Picky. So, of course, they immediately show um, Roger driving with Andrea and Nancy in the car, and you can tell they were all nervous. Um, Poor Andrea was getting emotional, and every time she got emotional, she got me emotional. And Roger asked if she was okay, and she's like, "No, I'm okay. I'm going home. I'm going home." So, and then she got emotional again, which, ooh. Um, so they finally get sit down. They have the roundtable discussion. At the roundtable, they had Roger, Andrea, Nancy, Corey, Jennifer, Susan, Slaughter, and Mustafa. And on the table, they had set out an EDI to kind of monitor how, if there's going to any changes that happen around them. So somehow the very first thing that got talked about was Corey and Jennifer discussed how they felt a time slip in the middle bedroom upstairs. They even said that their DVR, they cannot understand this. They don't know why the camera for that room. They said the timestamp, the actual time would jump back, and then it would go forward like maybe 10 minutes and then jump back again. And hey, Janine. Oh, thank you, honey. So he actually said on one of the DVRs in that middle bedroom, the date actually showed 1970. That kind of blew everybody's mind about that it actually showed 1970. And of course, that's the year the parents moved in to the farmhouse. They also said that a lot of people that were investigating that middle bedroom, they would say they were quite confused because they were saying that they felt like they had only been in that middle bedroom for 5 minutes, when in actuality they'd been in there for hours. And so Corey and Jen was saying how they had to tell people, if you're going to investigate, then set a timer so that you know when to get out. Otherwise, they find people that are in there a little too long. The other interesting thing that they talked about was if sorry was how he says, if you will turn out all the lights in that middle bedroom, lay down on the bed, he says, if you will just lay there and let your eyes kind of get focused to the night, the dark, he says you'll actually start seeing faces around the bed moving around. So I thought that was kind of interesting and spooky. The one thing I noticed was in the very beginning, Christine, Cindy, and Carolyn, who was in Georgia here at their home, they all looked very uncomfortable in the beginning. As the time went on, they started to relax, and you started hearing them tell more of their stories and their experiences living in the farmhouse. Now, I'm calling it the farmhouse, not the Conjuring House, because Andrea absolutely cannot stand the name that was given, the Conjuring House. So, out of respect for her, I call it the farmhouse. The most interesting thing, and this really got me choked up, is if y'all don't know, in Tennessee, when the floods happened, it was Nancy's granddaughter that ended up getting washed away, and it took some time for them to find her little body. So Nancy talks about, she talks about she's had 3 dreams, and in her dream, her granddaughter is in, all this is taking place in the backyard of the farmhouse. And she sees her daughter there. She says her daughter, her granddaughter, her face was badly bruised and she was soaking wet. And she was standing there in the middle of this really bright light that was coming down from the sky, and that she had saw her sister April above her granddaughter, so she knew her granddaughter was safe. And so she said in her dream she ran up and was able to actually touch her granddaughter and hold her hand. And she said she was terrified. She was, once she was able to realize she could touch her daughter, she was terrified to let her go, because she thought that if she let her go, then she would go up to heaven. And she said, she was trying to get to her cell phone to call her daughter to tell her, to tell her that she's okay and she's safe, she's sound, and she's holding her hand. So Nancy said that when they arrived at the farmhouse, she wanted to take a moment, and she went and had her little, she spent a little time on her own in the backyard. And she said, she took some time and talked to April, make sure that everything was okay. And that was I think out of everything, that was one of the hardest and emotional, oh my God, emotional thing that was shared. Now, during the roundtable discussion, you suddenly see Roger do something weird. He kind of moves, jump. I wouldn't say jump, but he kind of moves, and he kind of whispered to either Corey, because Corey was next to him and Andrea was next to him, but he had whispered he had been touched, and they heard it, and they asked Roger, "Who touched you?" And he said, without hesitation, "She's here. She just touched me." They asked, "Who touched you?" And he said, "Miss John Arnold." At the very same time that he was touched, the EDI showed that there was some changes happening right at that moment. So I thought that was really, really interesting to see that happen. And a lot of it was a lot of small talk um, during the discussion. And as because they were running so late to get this, I guess they were having some difficulties. I don't know. I don't know. They they were kind of pressed for time to keep on schedule. So you know, the in between things I could have done without. I mean, it was more interesting looking at where you can see all the multiple rooms and the street outside, and um, to me that was more fun seeing what's going on. A few people in the live stream did note some interesting things that were happening, some orbs and possibly a shadow and all that. But I think because they were pressed for time, it wasn't able to get addressed as quickly as they wanted to. And we're getting into some really good stuff here now. The next thing was Andrea and Nancy went up to Andrea's bedroom, the one with the chalkboard, and it has the boarding room in it. And immediately they started talking about the boarding room. Mustafa has never been there. And I don't think Susan Slaughter had been there either. I'm not sure. I don't think she was. But Mustafa had no idea what the boarding room was. And so they explained to him that's, where it was the warmest part of the house. And that's where all the women had their babies. And, it, like Andrea says, if you think of the time span in the history of the house, I mean, you have possibility of mothers losing their lives, babies losing, and we definitely know babies lost their lives. So they decided to start with the boarding room. Now, the interesting thing about the boarding room is Mustafa and Susan decided to lay a layer of cornstarch, perfect square. She drew a circle and put a ball right in the middle of that circle. And I think they did some little squiggle design, but everything else was kind of, nice and smooth and clean. When they went in there were claw marks. And as Nancy would explain, she says it was a big hand, and it went through the cornstarch. So it looked like, it went down, and then you could see where it lifted up the hand and kind of sprinkled cornstarch everywhere. And that was interesting. And there was several of them. So there was smaller hands and like claw. It's weird. It was very, very strange. A lot of people thought rodents or some kind of rat, which they don't have those things there. So that was quite interesting to see. Andrea and Cindy both said they did not like the boarding room. Cindy had a very traumatic thing happen to her in that room. She said that her and her friend decided they would go into the boarding room, shut the door, and try and communicate with the spirits and try and make peace with them. And the minute they started doing that and calling out, things went horribly wrong. If I can remember correctly, I think they said there was it felt like a whirlwind, or like wind kicking up suddenly. And Cindy's friend, terrified, runs out of the room, and the door shuts. And Cindy's trying to open the door, and the door's not opening for her. And so her friend had run downstairs, terrified. They could hear Cindy screaming. Nancy comes running up, and she's trying to open the door. She's trying to help her sister open the door, and nothing was working. And so, Cindy got mad and screamed for her sister to let go of the door, which Nancy said she let go of the door. And for some reason, they just could not get. What the heck? Okay, sorry. They just couldn't get the door to open. And Cindy said all of a sudden, something behind her grabbed a head full of hair. You know what else? When you're talking about, the 1800s, here you find a lot of infant graves. Do I believe babies died in birth there? Oh, yeah. I mean, you're looking at a time where there was no doctors. Typically, you're there with family members giving birth. Stillborns, absolutely. But they just didn't have, I mean, you're talking back when the Arnolds were in the house, you're talking 1700s, 1800s, where they just weren't up on their, you know, medical, really. I mean, they had no antibiotics. I mean, it's a rough time to think about. I mean, like, well, like Andrea said. Well, yeah, I agree that they're innocents, but you're talking about women in that time who have gave birth and gave birth and gave birth and gave birth, if they were able to. I mean, and you see how many survived to how many have died. It's quite shocking. Even in my family in the 1880s, my two-time grandmother lost 3 babies easy in birth. So, and if they're able to make it, I mean, even back then, as Andrea said, back then, it was unlucky to name your child until it was after a year old. So, yeah, it's just a rough time back there. I mean, oof. That's a good question, General. What they discussed at the round table was they believe the house became more active when children were there. They felt the house fed off children because their energies are so high, and it just livens up the house. Even Corey and Jen said, that their son had experienced something when he stayed the night there on his own. But they have older kids. From my understanding, the lady who bought the house from the parent, well, I shouldn't say the lady, the couple that bought the house from the parents, in 1980, ran a daycare center out of there, which, I mean, to me, it shocked me. And they did know the house was haunted. Um, like my husband said, I think a lot of the boarding room is residual energy. Now, there was something in the boarding room that night. Cindy and her friend tried to make peace, and I think that's because of um, they called upon spirits, thinking they were doing something nice, and it kind of backfired. Cindy said when she was trying to open the door and it wouldn't open, something grabbed her by the back of her hair and yanked her to the floor. She was held on the floor. And Andrea said that before they bought the Conjuring house, her parents owned their own business and they had mannequins. So they used the boarding room as a storage place because they didn't even know what that room was used for until they talked to Mr. Kenyon. Mr. Kenyon is the last owner that lived in the house that was part of the Arnold thing. So he was the very last family member to live there. And Mr. Kenyon did tell them what the boarding room was, but they kept it as storage. And Cindy said, as she's held down on the floor, the mannequins that were stored in there were moving. And she says something finally let her go, and she just burst through that door. It opened, and on they went. But Andrea said she's never had a bad experience in the boarding room. She said she just didn't like it because it was heavy. A lot of sadness she felt in there. So it's interesting. I think as long as you don't call on anything, I don't think anything's going to get you. I think a lot of it's just residual energy. Let's see. What about the opinion of people that demons come through as children? I think demons can take any form if they want to gain your trust. Some say they use children because people trust children. But I mean, you're talking about something that is very rare. Very, very rare. Um, there's a priest that I follow, a Catholic priest. Um, he was sent to the Vatican and learned exorcism. And he's an older man, so his entire time as an exorcist, he has performed only 6 exorcisms. So that's a long span of time. We're not talking 10 years. We're talking, when he went to the Vatican to here to be an exorcist, 6 people. And the way he explained it, there's 4 levels of possession. Your house. What was the third thing? I forgot what the third thing was. Second, I know the third was that it attaches to you, but it has not possessed you fully. And then the fourth, of course, is a full possession. And he says he's done thousands of the 3, which is like the home or helping getting this attachment off. He's done thousands of those. He says those aren't a big deal, but full on possession, he's only done 6. Oh. I, mm, I yeah, I think there's just people in this world that are so rotten and so cruel. When they die, do they become demons? No, I don't believe they become demons. Demons, if you want to go by the Christian religion, are entities. They've never lived their life on earth as a human. So, I think people can have an absolutely cruel side to them that can do disgusting, vile things, and in death they're going to be the exact same way. Stop. don't. I keep him and the kid both demon, demon, demon. Stop. Um, yes, General, you're absolutely right. Demons, if real, will come through and pick whatever will affect and disarm you the most. You're absolutely right. Um, else, my opinion personally is demons look for weak points. Yes. The interesting thing the priest said is everyone he has dealt with um, that has, and we're not even talking about full on possession, but we're talking about attachment. And he says every person he's dealt with has, he says probably a good 98% have had been sexually abused in one way or another. And I think it's those little cracks that something has been done to a person um, can easily let in, as the priest says, it easily lets demons in. And if you just got those, it doesn't, and in, it could be physical abuse as well. And, whatever crack you have, yeah, it's going to find it. And but if I hear a priest tell me that he's only done sex exorcisms, then I'm not too worried about it. I've never run across anything um too frightening in my life. And yes, Ed is right. Predators also, they find kids' weak points. Um, so it's a play in words is basically what it is. And Emery wants to know your opinion. The all-knowing eye. You don't want his opinion. Are you gonna come on and express your opinion? Come on.
Hello. Yeah, it's what is my opinion about demons, because that's quickly done. I mean, I don't believe in demons. Like, I don't believe in angels. I think if you believe in demons, you should see angels too.
Yeah.
So that's my thing. But yeah, if you don't believe in angels, then there's no demons either. Now
Pedro.
that if you want to talk about entities, I do believe there are entities. I do believe that there are uh, bad entities in this world.
But what would entities be?
Well, that's the question. Like over here, you've got a lot of Native American
That's elementals.
entities. Yeah, well, uh, entities in the sense of elementals, as in the sense of um, anything you have in the paranormal sphere. Uh,
Okay.
well, every country has its own little thing, don't they?
Yes.
So,
I mean, yeah.
but
Even the old religions.
for me, it's like you cannot be both, right? You cannot be Christian.
You
Uh,
cannot be
and,
both what?
Well,
Christian,
you cannot be non-Christian and then believe in demons. That's kind of weird.
right? But remember the video that I have up, because we talked about this, and that, I mean, me and Ed have all kinds of discussions, and that's what we discussed, because he always says, look, if there's demons, then there has to be angels, and why aren't we hearing that? And I actually have a video that makes people think. And what had happened is a young woman was driving home and somehow rolled her car, and she was upside down in the river. Um, so somebody saw it, reported it. Police and fire and rescue got there. They see the car upside down in the water. They immediately determined that the young lady was deceased and she died in the accident. So they kind of slowed down their action a little bit, but then you hear, they're still by the car, you hear come through their radios a very metallic-y sounding voice going, help us, please help us. And you see the police officer and the fire and rescue literally jump and realize there's a baby in the back seat. And they immediately get they managed to get her out. The baby was alive, barely. I mean, the top of her head, her face wasn't submerged, it's just the top of her head, right, was submerged in the water, which, I mean, that right there can drop your body temperature quite quickly. The little girl did survive, and I ended up finding an interview with these gentlemen, and they were point blank asked, what do you think came through and said, help us, please? And their exact words were, an angel. So, I mean, it's way in the beginning, because I thought that was something to think about. If people are going to say there's demons, well, there's got to be something out there. And I found that these people believed that, an angel is the one that said, help. Emery, okay, there's some good and bad in the spirit world as there is in living. Yes. Demons and angels come down to what your beliefs is, correct. For my instance, I moved into a brand new house, and immediately, boom, this man is in my face, just raging, dark hair, big woolly beard, just raging in my face. And for a long time, I tried to ignore him. Finally, I was on my own. And what freaked me out was that my 150-pound Doberman, I'm trying to go to bed and he won't come in the bedroom. And so I freak out. I'm on my own. I freak out. And I tell my dad, I call my dad. I was like, what do I do? What do I do? He thought I was crazy. And he realized, though, this is what I'm seeing. And he says, well, talk to him. And I nicknamed him Angry Man because what I got was, it's not my war. It wasn't my time to go. So he wasn't a nice man. So more than likely in his life, he wasn't a nice man either. I mean, getting in people's faces is rude. Whether you're Christian, pagan, or whatever, respectfully, if you're yes, because I believe every religion has, good and bad because that's how we are as humans. It's free will, and yeah, it's who you are in life is who you're in death. I don't, you know, it's free will. You can't make somebody do something they don't want to do, and I think it's the same in death. I mean, just nasty, mean people. Doesn't mean they're demons. They're just nasty, mean people. So, so now they're still upstairs with the whole team. Andrea, Nancy, Mustafa, Susan Slaughter. They're all upstairs with the team. They're talking about their experiences, and so they're Nancy shared an experience. To be honest, Els, rabies. You're funny. God. Um, I've never heard, and I've never heard anybody talk about an animal being possessed. Hmm. They have souls like us. It could be, but I don't. I've never, honestly, I've never heard that one. That's a Cujo. uh, I like our American bulldog. He was just a stubborn old man. So, Nancy shares that when Andrea went to college, everybody was excited, fighting for bedrooms, and Nancy had said that Cindy had taken my she had taken Andrea's bedroom, and Nancy said she was downstairs with her mom, and they suddenly hear Cindy screaming like a mad person, and they take off running. Carolyn is, of course, she gets in front of her daughter Nancy, and as she gets to the top of the steps, she stops, comes halfway down, and tells Nancy to go downstairs. Do not come upstairs at all. Turns out, what Caroline saw was Cindy was on the bed, and the bed was levitated and moving around the room. And the one thing that I find very interesting in reading Andrea's books is, for a long time, the kids didn't talk about their experiences because they saw their mother struggling. So, you know, what are you? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So, it was interesting. And Caroline, she also was protecting the children. So when she witnessed something that one of her kids went through, it was between her and that child, and they never discussed it with the rest of the family. So everybody kind of, kept to themselves. The kids kept to themselves because they didn't want to, upset their parents. They were going through a tough time. um, so I found that very interesting that Caroline, you know, never told anybody until later what she saw, and not wanting, the kids. Oh my God. Reincarnated as a cow. No, thank you. So I found that very interesting. And and then Andrea decided unicorns are awesome. They got that nice pointy horn. Right. Thank you, Anne Marie. No, I don't want to come back. One time is enough, like you said. No. So Andrea tells this very interesting story. She's talking about the window that's between her bedroom and the middle bedroom. And she said, she would go up there, and if she wanted like some peace and quiet to listen to music, read books, do her homework, whatnot, she would close that door. And she said that she was sitting there, she would sit there and she would see this gray, kind of swirling, dancing ghost on the other side of her window, and that it would come down the window and go underneath her door. And it would come up, and she said it was just kind of like swirling, dancing gray mist. And she said she was always polite whenever she encountered spirits in the farmhouse. And she would say, "Well, not this time. It's not a good time to chat. I'm busy doing my homework." And she says it would just go underneath the door. And what she figured out was it didn't like that door closed. So she kept the door open, but every time she closed that door, that gray swirling mist. So I thought that was quite interesting. I would have loved to have found out why it didn't want the door closed. That would drive me mad. I would love that. Then they moved to the middle bedroom, and Cindy shared an experience she had in that middle bedroom. She said she was about 7 or 8. She was playing in the middle room. She said this woman suddenly appeared in front of her. And she said she assumed the woman had her head like this, and she had her arms straight out, stretched to her. And she was coming towards her, and she said she'll never forget. The woman said to her, "Come to me, little girl." And the minute she said she heard that, she was boom out of there. Actually, well, the in the farmhouse, all the doors upstairs have that bolt. So there's no doorknob or anything. It's just this bolt you slide. Hey, Eli. Um, so uh-oh. Child is fixing to get in trouble. Hang on 1 second, because I'm not going to yell in your ear. Handle, dear. He can't be online when we're online. I guess maybe that's it. According to Andrea, they have seen the latch slide on doors as when they were kids. So I don't know. But the one thing they asked Cindy when she saw this lady, she just assumed that the lady kind of had her head crooked to the side, and was coming at her. She wasn't being mean or scary. She just, "Come to me, little girl." And I thought that was Interesting. Because that's what they did ask her was, well, was her head to the side? Was it like Miss John Arnold who hung herself? Um, her description of the lady fits the description that her mom had and her dad had, Carolyn and Roger. No, the person who hung herself was Miss John Arnold. They don't even know her first name because in the 1700s, hey, paranormal side, what they say is that nobody knows her first name, Miss John Arnold, because at that time, you know, when you married, you took your husband's identity, but it was told to them by at this time the man was quite elderly, and he says he can remember her husband, Miss John Arnold's husband, passed away. She was 93, and she's the one that hung herself in the barn. It wasn't Bathsheba or anybody like that. It was Miss John Arnold. um, their first thought was it Miss John Arnold, because the way Caroline always saw her was her. She said her neck was it wasn't normal. It was all crooked. And what happened was they said the farmhand cut her down. He's the one that found her. He cut her down from the barn, took the noose off, and brought her into the house because they knew in that time in the 1700s, you know, you didn't, if you committed suicide, then you were not allowed to be buried on hallowed ground. So, you know, I think make him stop. No, it's okay. But it is interesting because the description, I mean, she described everything, her clothes, how her hair was in a bun. She had dark hair and it was on in a bun, and even described the apron that she had on. And it's the exact same thing that Caroline and Roger, mainly Caroline, and Caroline and Roger did state that he felt, this was at the round table discussion, that he felt that Miss John Arnold is the one who tormented Caroline, because and I, you know, have talked to Andrea about this, and steal his phone. He's okay. Trust me, he's not any worse than my husband. So can he be stopped? But I found it very interesting. They said, you know, Bathsheba had nothing to do with the property. Jen and Corey did ask because they could not find anything on the hanging, and they couldn't find anything on Bathsheba. And Andrea did say when, you know, her mom, and she knew exactly where to go. You know, it's on microfiche at some university in Massachusetts. Sorry. What do? Are you messing with my microphone?
It was on bidirectional. It should be on
Oh,
directional.
sorry.
That's okay.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely. you know, he's got that very dry, sarcastic sense of humor. So I'm used to it. But it was interesting because at the round table they did discuss Bathsheba, and Bathsheba was not hung on the property. She was part of the Sherman family. They had their own farm a mile away. They did read that there was an inquest done on a child. They don't know if it's Bathsheba's child or if it was the Arnold's child, that died while she was taking care of it there at the farmhouse. Nothing came of it. So she was never charged for any harm that she had done. Thank you, dear. Miss, are you talking about Miss Arnold? The crooked neck lady. Is that who you're talking about, Els? See, there's no connection. Miss Arnold passed away, or I should say, hung herself in 1700s. Bathsheba, this is the 1800s with Bathsheba. Nothing came of the inquest, so she was never found guilty. She was never charged of any harm doing of anybody. She's not a witch. She's buried on hallowed ground. She had 4 children. 3 of them passed away before the age of 3, and 1 survived. And unfortunately, because of these rumors and my interview with Andrea, she said, until my dying days, I will defend Bathsheba, because Bathsheba had nothing to do with the farmhouse. She had her own farm a mile away. They probably knew each other because they were neighbors, but she has nothing to do with the house. Roger and Caroline both believe that the attacks that Caroline received were from Miss John Arnold. And basically in Old English, if we translate it to now, she basically told Caroline that she is forever the matron. She was a matron before, she's a matron now, and she will be a matron after Caroline dies. And that makes sense. I mean, 93 years old, probably lived on the farm all her life, or a huge chunk of her life. And that's her house. And, Caroline coming in and being the matron of her family and how close knit the family was, it probably rubbed on Miss Arnold, Miss John Arnold, big time. So Bathsheba has, unfortunately, nothing. Well, I shouldn't say unfortunately. That's a bad choice of words. Bathsheba has nothing to do with the property except for the inquest. And unfortunately, her headstone had to be removed. It had been replaced 2 times. And people feel the need to chip away her tombstone, so they've had to remove it. And the Historical Society has hidden it because they don't want it to be destroyed, and we lose that. Do we have any idea how many people passed away at the farmhouse? Well, we know I'm going to say 70s, probably. The property was carved out, and the Richardsons are the first family to own the property. What we do know historically is the house that is there now was built 1730. So 1670. I mean, and it's remained in family. So it was the Richardson, and I think the Richardsons probably built a 2-room cabin. But I think over time, as the family grew and everything, they expanded on the house. But it was the Richardson family. It was passed down to a wife who was a Richardson, and it became the Arnold's house. And the Arnold's family has forever owned the house until 1970. And that's when Mr. Kenyon took, he sold the house to the parents. Hey, Mike, welcome. So let's see. The amount of people that passed away in the house. Oh, wow. I mean, you're talking almost, almost 300 years. That's a lot of people that have come and gone. On there. And I do know that Miss John Arnold is buried in the old Arnold Cemetery, which was part of the property of the farmhouse. Originally, the farmhouse was over 1,000 acres. Now that piece of property it's been cut and sold, so it's on the cemetery is on somebody else's property. But her and the family, Miss John Arnold, who hung herself, her and her family are buried there. That's the cemetery, I think, that John Huntington, when he was using the spirit box, he asked the spirits, which way do you want me to go? Left, right, or straight? And they guided him straight to the old cemetery. Oh, and it was gorgeous, very old. Yeah, I'm guessing a lot of people have come and gone. So that right there with Cindy and seeing more than likely Miss John Arnold was really frightening to her. Then Nancy told a very interesting story. Yeah, tomorrow, Saber, don't worry about it, honey. It'll be the same time tomorrow. It'll be different for everybody in the UK and mainland Europe. I think because their time changes tonight. So as they're upstairs, Nancy shared a story that when at the time, I think the 4 daughters and Roger were at the filming of The Conjuring. And so Nancy said they were, yes, I'm sorry, Els, yes. Oh, I know. So at the Conjuring, Nancy said they were filming the hanging of Bathsheba. And so Nancy and Cindy thought they would get a closer look of them performing the hanging of Bathsheba. And Nancy said all of a sudden Cindy just freaks out. She takes off running. She's crying hysterically, ends up in some woman's arm. The woman's holding her. And she says, Cindy was just screaming and crying, saying, "That's the woman that came after me as a little girl." And I think it's not that she was saying it was Bathsheba. I think she was just saying that was Miss John Arnold, because Bathsheba never hung. Bathsheba died of old age naturally in her home, which is a mile down the road from the farmhouse. So, um, yeah, the dark zone starts at 5 and runs to 1 a.m. So, um, oh, and then the other interesting thing was, yeah, uh, when I lived over in Holland, I could not get used to um, their time changes over there before us, but when we roll forward, our time changes before it's so confusing. Don't ask me. I don't even like this daylight savings time. It's stupid. Too confusing. So, okay. This is I always found this to be interesting because I briefly heard about it, and Andrea last night went into more detail about it. Um, April is the youngest of the sisters, and she's the one that's passed away. But Andrea was talking about April, and they said, April was just a little thing, and they would always see her in her room playing and talking like she's talking to somebody. And she told her mom that she had a special playmate, and his name was Oliver Richardson. And when Caroline got into this obsession of wanting to research this property, she wanted to know what was going on. I mean, she was beaten with a hanger. I mean, literally in midair, this hanger is beating her all over. The neighbor witnessed it. Neighbor backed out slowly. The girls didn't know what to do. A lot of things happened to Caroline. So Caroline got into this obsession that she needed to find out what was, who owned the property, who built the house. I mean, she went, very obsessive. And um both in her research, that's where she found out the first owners were the Richardsons. And then it was passed down by marriage, and it became Arnold because, in the 1700s, women, even 1800s, women weren't allowed to own property. So if they inherited something, it went into their husband's name. So it became the Arnold estate. She found out all kinds of interesting stuff in it, but it's hard to find, you know, eh, these things. And I mean, she went all in that area researching it, all hand notes, and her research, which held a lot of information, was given to the Warrens with the promise that they would return it to her, which they never did. But Andrea said that when the Warrens came to visit, they would sit down with the girls, want to know, what the girls had experienced. And April never said anything to the Warrens about Oliver because she was terrified that the Warrens were there to make him leave. And so she never, ever, ever spoke to the Warrens, only the family. So they believe Oliver Richardson is the boy who drank the horse ligament and crawled into the crawl space and passed away. It is kind of sad that, you know, all that research and I mean, Andrea said the research was just massive and, you know, no problem. Thank you for coming, Pedro. Thank you so much. And have a wonderful time on your investigation. So, yeah, so that's the end of day one. It was, you know, like I said, very interesting. Some stories that I haven't even seen or heard or read was told. It was interesting to see the reaction of Roger when he was touched. I mean, when he said, "It's her, she touched me," he said it with such conviction. And when they said who, he says, "Miss John Arnold." And he said it with such conviction. The other interesting thing was when Nancy was talking about Cindy being locked in the boarding room. Cindy, to this day, blamed Nancy for keeping her locked in the room. She swore that Nancy held that door shut and wouldn't let her out. And right there live, Nancy was like, "Cindy, I would never do that to you. I never held that door shut." And she's like, "You need to know, I didn't hold that door shut. When you told me to let go, I let go of that door." And it's so heartbreaking because, you know, everybody experienced things differently. Like Andrea said, Nancy, Andrea, and Roger love the house. Love the house. Cindy, oh my goodness, who's the other sister's name? Got it all written down. Too many sisters to remember. Cindy. Caroline. Don't like the house at all. They will never go back, ever. Of course. I had it somewhere. And no, can't find it. I'm not going to sit here and scroll through it, but the other two sisters, no. Caroline, absolutely not. I know one of the questions that was asked, and it was quite shocking to me that it was asked, was because they had a Zoom where you could get in Zoom and ask the family some questions. And one of the questions asked was, if Caroline passes away, does she feel the house will pull her spirit there? Which I was like, wait, do what? Which Caroline spoke with conviction. Absolutely not. I hate that house. Don't want nothing to do with that house. And I was like, I cannot believe somebody asked that question. The other sister said the same thing. No, they don't want nothing to do with the house. and I do know I caught Andrea's show because Andrea had her show, and Andrea was saying her mother got sick about 4 hours before they were to go live, and she was in the bathroom sick as a dog, and her I mean, they weren't sure they were going to go live, and she says literally in the last 30 minutes that her mom felt a little bit better. And I mean, you want to talk about the tough woman, she sat it through, not feeling very good at all. And did the live because she knew how much it meant to Andrea and Roger and Nancy. And what a lot of people don't know is Nancy, when the house sold, Nancy and Andrea were mad. Nancy talked to the new owners and says, I'll be your caretaker of the house. And she dated a young man with the last name Richardson. He was a direct descendant of the original people who owned the property. And every time he came into that farmhouse, Nancy said the spirits just lit up, and things just kept happening, crazy things. So, you know, I thought that was quite interesting to hear. Um, they did talk about the box they found in the cellar. And it's a kid's drawing on this wooden box, and it shows this lady with a bent neck and arms stretched out. The parents said they don't know what this box is, and none of them drew on it. So the only conclusion is one of the kids that was being cared for um, by the owners that bought the farmhouse from the parents that ran the child care center. They think a child, you know, either in the basement drew that, or there was a box upstairs. Maybe it was a toy box. I don't know, but they drew on it. And that was what's drawn. I do know that there are people that have talked about working for, we don't, out of just politeness, we don't, I'm not going to bring up the previous owner who sold it to Jen and Corey, but she went through a lot of employees because they were seeing things. Babies were actually being moved out of their crib. Blankets that were covering babies were, when they came back, were draped over the top of the crib. Crazy, weird stuff that happened. And I'm just shocked. I don't know if I could have a child care center there, or even drop my kid off there to be cared for. I mean, everybody knew the house. They knew that the house was haunted. Even the people that live next door. My understanding is that house is even more haunted than the farmhouse. More. So that is, they did an investigation. Mustafa, Susan Slaughter, and Brandon Avis. But Brandon Avis was not there. They just kind of brought him in, and there wasn't really much that went on at the house. They did. Now, there was the Estes method. I'll take that back. Susan Slaughter did an Estes method in the boarding room. The one thing that irritated me is they never asked questions. Mustafa just kind of sat there, and she was just, you know, I mean, it was crazy. I mean, she would say something, and I'm like, Mustafa, follow with an answer. Ask her, ask her, ask her, ask her. He just kind of sat there, which I didn't. I don't think maybe he understands the Estes method. There's just he never asked any questions. They just kind of let her sit there, and she did have to stop. Um, she was complaining that her legs were warm, and then it went cold, and that her hand was really cold. Um, which Mustafa said, yeah. But besides the Estes method in the boarding room, they really didn't get a whole lot of anything. I think it just kind of died down when the parents left for the night. Um, it'll be interesting to see what happens tonight. And hopefully they figured everything out and we're not an hour and a half behind in everything. So, unfortunately, we'll have to wait for 2 hours. They'll start. And the parents will be there as well. So that's the one thing for me is seeing how that house acts when the parents are in there. I know somebody in the chat said there was a shadow that moved, but you also have several people in there that are trying to run this thing. So a shadow I'm not too worried about. Mustafa says during the roundtable discussion, he said either as a whisper or something got rubbed against a wall or something. But that was it. There was running when they were upstairs. That's Andrea's bedroom, and the boarding room is that little tiny doorway. They did report Mustafa and the cameraman Bill both heard running from the middle bedroom to the furthest bedroom from Andrea. So on the other side, they heard running and a door move. That's the library. That was Caroline and Roger's bedroom. That's where a lot of activity happened, and Caroline got a lot of things. And they ended up moving their bedroom to the summer kitchen because it was just too much for them. You're absolutely welcome. I figured, why not talk about it and share it? I think it's, y'all, you guys should be just as involved in the, that was the seance room. Don't you get us in trouble now. That's the seance room where the seance took place, and Caroline was picked up and thrown. And as me and Andrea talked about, it was quite shocking that they allowed children to be there and witness this. I mean, if you're going to do a seance like that, I just think everybody was a little in over their head with the whole thing. But so tomorrow, I mean, hopefully a whole lot more will happen. They did explain that they felt the house was a lot calmer. The house was a little bit more open, so they had a little bit more activity. The last time they were there was when Ghost Adventures was there. And they said they just felt like the house kind of closed up, Um, sorry, Frank. But I think, they did say the way people behaved in the house was much different. They said, everybody was very respectful this go around, which made the family open up more, which then made the house open up more. Like I said, the two sisters and Caroline, you could tell were very uncomfortable, but they did loosen up and was able to share some of their things, mainly on Zoom, which was nice. Caroline did make a statement that Bathsheba had nothing to do with the house, and that she firmly believes that it was Miss John Arnold that's in the house that is the matron, and she says she will forever be the matron. So there you go. It's the house is crazy. Your tails and ruts. Oh my God, you get me in trouble. So we'll see if now that they've got a little bit, maybe the house will open up a little bit more. But it was definitely a much different vibe. More welcoming, more open. And Andrea and Nancy firmly believe it's because of how the house is being treated right now. With a lot of respect and kindness and respect to the family, and making sure the family's okay and they're taken care of, and everything. So there you go. The wonderful world of The Conjuring. Oh, it's hard not to say that. Hard. First slip up. The Farmhouse. I mean, Andrea did state that she hated that name, The Conjuring House, hated it, and hated that it stuck, because that is her home. And you have to understand why there's such a pull. Andrea says this is the last house that our family all lived together under one roof, because when they sold the house in 1980, Andrea was in college finishing up, and Nancy stayed to be the caretaker, and the rest of the family, moved to Georgia. And by the time everybody came, all the sisters married and, were on their way. So they said this is the last house the entire family lived together. And so that's why there's such a love for this house with Andrea and Nancy and Roger. Is and it's kind of sad. No problem. I have come to an end. Thank you, Els, for being here. I want to say thank you. Thank you so much, guys. Tomorrow, same time, I'll let you know play by play of what goes on, and maybe maybe something will pick up on the investigative side. So thank you so much, guys. I love you. You mean a lot to me. So have a safe night. Have a safe evening. And we'll see you tomorrow.